July 17, 1944. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel sits in his study in Herrlingen, a village near Ulm, his left eye still swollen shut from the strafing attack that nearly killed him 3 days earlier. His skull is fractured, his face is a mass of bruises, but the physical pain is nothing compared to the weight of the decision he's already made. He's been in contact with them, the men who want Hitler dead. Not directly, of course. Rommel is too careful for that. But he's listened. He's nodded. He's let certain men know that when the moment comes, when someone finally removes the Führer from power, Rommel will not stand in the way. More than that, he'll help negotiate peace with the Western Allies. He'll use his name, his reputation, to save what's left of Germany. 3 days from now, a bomb will explode in a conference room in East Prussia. It will fail to kill Hitler, and in the investigation that follows, the Gestapo will discover a network of conspirators that reaches into the highest levels of the Wehrmacht. They'll arrest hundreds, they'll torture dozens, and eventually, inevitably, they'll learn about Rommel. The question isn't whether Hitler will find out. The question is what he'll do when he does. Rommel's disillusionment didn't happen overnight. In 1940, he was a true believer. When Hitler gave him command of the 7th Panzer Division for the invasion of France, Rommel drove his men so hard, moved so fast, that they called his division the Ghost Division, because even German high command lost track of where he was. He covered 200 miles in 2 days. He captured a British general who didn't even know German forces were in the area. He wrote letters to his wife Lucy describing the thrill of it all, the speed, the victories, the Führer's genius. By 1941, he was in North Africa, commanding the Afrika Korps, and the legend of the Desert Fox was born. He won battles he shouldn't have won. He captured Tobruk. He pushed to within 60 miles of Alexandria. British soldiers respected him. Allied newspapers wrote about him. Hitler loved him because Rommel delivered victories when the Eastern Front was bleeding Germany white. But North Africa also taught Rommel something Hitler never understood. You can't win wars with willpower alone. You need supplies, you need fuel, you need ammunition, and Rommel never had enough of any of it. He'd plan an offensive, calculate exactly what he needed, submit his requests to Berlin, and Berlin would promise everything and deliver half, or a third, or nothing at all. He'd rage at his staff, write furious letters to Hitler's headquarters, fly back to Germany to argue his case in person. Hitler would listen, smile, promise that everything would be taken care of. Then Rommel would return to Africa and find that nothing had changed. The supply convoys still got sunk by British submarines and aircraft. The fuel tankers still burned in Benghazi harbor. His panzers still ran out of gasoline 50 miles from their objectives. By the time Montgomery pushed him out of Egypt in November 1942, Rommel understood. Germany was going to lose this war, not because of any failure of courage or skill, but because of mathematics. The Allies had more of everything. More tanks, more planes, more fuel, more men, more factories. And Hitler's response to this reality was to forbid retreat, to demand that German soldiers hold every position to the last man, to treat any suggestion of withdrawal as cowardice or treason. Rommel watched it happen in Tunisia. Hitler ordered the Afrika Korps to hold a position that couldn't be held. Rommel argued for evacuation, for saving the army to fight another day. Hitler refused. In May 1943, 250,000 German and Italian soldiers surrendered. Men who could have been saved. Men who could have defended Europe. Gone. Wasted. Because Hitler couldn't accept reality. That's when Rommel started listening to different voices. It began carefully, quietly. In 1944, when Hitler gave him command of Army Group B in France, responsible for defending the Atlantic Wall against the inevitable Allied invasion, Rommel met men who shared his doubts. Not traitors, not cowards, but professional officers who loved Germany and understood that Hitler was leading their country to destruction. Dr. Karl Strolin, the mayor of Stuttgart, visited Rommel in February 1944. They'd known each other since the First World War. Strolin was careful, indirect. He talked about the situation, about how the war was going, about what might happen to Germany if it continued. He mentioned other men, important men, who were thinking about Germany's future. Men like Karl Goerdeler, the former mayor of Leipzig. Men who believed that Germany needed new leadership if it was going to survive. Rommel listened. He didn't commit to anything, but he didn't shut the conversation down either. Then came Hans Speidel, Rommel's new chief of staff, who arrived in April 1944. Speidel was brilliant, cultured, politically connected. He'd studied in Paris, spoke perfect French, understood that this war wasn't just about military victory anymore. It was about saving Germany from total annihilation. Speidel knew the conspirators, he knew their plans, and he carefully, gradually, let Rommel know that there were men prepared to act. By May, Rommel was meeting with César von Hoffacker, a lieutenant colonel on the staff of the military governor of France. Hoffacker was Stauffenberg's cousin. He was deep in the conspiracy, and he told Rommel things that no one was supposed to say out loud. That there was a plan, that Hitler would be removed, that when it happened, they would need Rommel's help to negotiate an armistice with the Western Allies. Rommel's position was complicated. He didn't want Hitler assassinated. He thought that would make Hitler a martyr, that it would fracture Germany just when unity was most needed. He wanted Hitler arrested, put on trial, forced to answer for his crimes before the German people. But he agreed that Hitler had to go, and he agreed that when the moment came, he would help negotiate peace. He had conditions, though. Germany would make peace with Britain and America, but continue fighting the Soviet Union. The Western Allies would recognize that Bolshevism was the real enemy. They'd join Germany in pushing back the Red Army. It was naive, perhaps delusional, but it was what Rommel believed was possible. Through June and early July, the meetings continued. Rommel never attended the core conspiracy meetings. He maintained deniability. But Hoffacker visited him repeatedly. Speidel kept him informed. Strolin came to see him. They all knew that Rommel was with them, not actively plotting, but ready to act when the moment came. Rommel had his own crisis to manage. The Allied invasion came on June 6. And despite all his preparations, despite the Atlantic Wall, despite his panzer divisions, the Allies established their beachhead. Rommel fought brilliantly with inadequate forces, but he was losing. By July, he knew Normandy was lost. He knew France was lost. He knew the war was lost. On July 15, he wrote a letter to Hitler, a formal military assessment. He laid out the situation in cold, precise terms. The German forces in Normandy were being destroyed. Replacements couldn't match losses. Supplies couldn't reach the front. The Allies had total air superiority. The situation was hopeless. He ended with a statement that bordered on insubordination. I must ask you to draw the consequences from this situation. In other words, end the war. He never got an answer. Because 2 days later, on July 17, British fighters caught his staff car on a road near Livarot. The pilots strafed the vehicle. Rommel's driver was killed. The car crashed. Rommel was thrown onto the road with a fractured skull, broken cheekbones and injuries to his left eye. He was rushed to a hospital, then moved to his home in Herrlingen to recover. He was still there, still recovering, when the bomb exploded. July 20, 1944. 1:22 in the afternoon. In a conference room at the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's headquarters in East Prussia, Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg places a briefcase under a heavy oak table. Inside the briefcase are 2 pounds of plastic explosive. Stauffenberg excuses himself, leaves the building, and waits. At 12:42, the bomb detonates. The explosion tears through the room. 4 men are killed. Hitler survives. The heavy oak table shields him. He staggers out of the wreckage with a perforated eardrum, some burns and splinters in his legs. But he's alive, and he's furious. Within hours, the conspiracy collapses. Stauffenberg is arrested in Berlin and shot that same night. The Gestapo begins rounding up suspects. Anyone connected to Stauffenberg, anyone who'd ever expressed doubt about the Führer, anyone whose loyalty was even slightly questionable. They arrest generals, colonels, aristocrats, civilians. They torture them, they execute them, and they keep digging. Rommel, lying in his bed in Herrlingen, hears the news on the radio. He knows immediately what it means. The attempt failed. Hitler survived, and now the Gestapo will tear apart everyone even remotely connected to the plot. He waits. There's nothing else he can do. His injuries are too severe to travel. His face is still swollen. His head still throbs with every heartbeat. He can barely walk. All he can do is wait and hope that his careful distance from the core conspirators will protect him. It doesn't. Caesar von Hofacker is arrested on July 25. The Gestapo interrogates him. At first, he says nothing, but the Gestapo has methods. They torture him for days, and eventually, broken and desperate, he talks. He mentions Rommel, not as an active plotter, but as someone who knew, someone who'd been informed, someone who'd agreed to help after Hitler was removed. The interrogation transcripts reach Hitler's headquarters in early August. Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, reviews them personally. He knows what they mean. Rommel, the Desert Fox, the hero of North Africa, the field marshal who appears on propaganda posters, is implicated in the conspiracy to kill the Führer. Himmler takes the information to Hitler. There are no witnesses to that conversation, no official record. But we know what happened next, and we can reconstruct Hitler's reaction from the accounts of those who saw him in the days that followed. Hitler doesn't want to believe it. Rommel is his creation. Hitler made him, took an obscure infantry officer and gave him command of a panzer division, sent him to Africa and turned him into a legend, promoted him to field marshal, trusted him with the defense of France, and Rommel repaid that trust by conspiring with traitors. According to Nikolaus von Below, Hitler's Luftwaffe adjutant, the Führer's initial reaction is denial. He insists there must be a mistake. Rommel is loyal. Rommel is a soldier, not a politician. He wouldn't involve himself in something like this, but Himmler has the transcripts. Hofacker's testimony is clear. Rommel knew about the conspiracy. Rommel agreed to help negotiate peace after Hitler was removed. There's no ambiguity. Hitler's denial turns to rage. He summons his inner circle. He paces his office, shouting, how dare Rommel betray him, after everything he'd done for him, after all the honors, the promotions, the trust. This is how Rommel repays the Führer's faith. But Hitler has a problem. He can't just arrest Rommel. Rommel isn't like the other conspirators. He's not some staff officer or minor aristocrat. He's the Desert Fox. He's a national hero. The German people love him. The army worships him. If Hitler puts Rommel on trial, if the details of Rommel's doubts about the war become public, it could shatter morale at the worst possible moment. The Eastern Front is collapsing. The Red Army is pushing into Poland. The Western Allies are breaking out of Normandy. Germany is losing on every front. The last thing Hitler needs is a public trial that reveals one of Germany's most famous generals thought the war was unwinnable. According to Heinz Linger, Hitler's valet, the Führer spends days wrestling with the decision. He wants Rommel punished. He wants him to suffer, but he also needs to control the narrative. He needs Rommel to disappear without creating a martyr or revealing the extent of the conspiracy. Wilhelm Keitel, the head of the Wehrmacht High Command, suggests a solution. Give Rommel a choice, trial or suicide. If he chooses suicide, his death will be announced as resulting from his injuries from the July 17 attack. He'll receive a state funeral. His family will be protected. His reputation will remain intact. If he refuses, he'll be arrested, tried before the People's Court, and executed as a traitor. His family will be persecuted. His name will be destroyed. Hitler agrees. It's the perfect solution. Rommel dies either way, but this way, Hitler controls the story. On October 7, Rommel receives a phone call from Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel. The conversation is brief and cryptic. Keitel tells Rommel that he's being recalled to Berlin. There are questions that need to be answered. Rommel should prepare to travel. Rommel knows what it means. They're coming for him. He's stronger now. His skull has healed. His face is still scarred, but he can walk. He can think clearly. He could run. He could try to reach the Western Allies, surrender, tell them everything. But he knows they'd never let him get that far. The Gestapo is watching. His house is certainly under surveillance, and even if he escaped, what would happen to Lucy? To his son Manfred, who's 15 years old and serving in an anti-aircraft battery? He decides to wait, to face whatever's coming. October 14, 1944. Noon. Rommel is in his study, talking with his wife and his son, who's home on leave. They're discussing Manfred's future, what he should study after the war, whether he should pursue a military career or something else. A car pulls up outside. A black Mercedes. Two generals get out. Wilhelm Burgdorf, Hitler's chief adjutant, and Ernst Meisel, another general from Hitler's staff. They're both in full uniform, both wearing the Nazi Party insignia. Rommel goes to the door. He knows them both. He invites them in, offers them lunch. Burgdorf declines. He says they need to speak with Rommel privately. It's a military matter. Rommel leads them to his study. Manfred watches them go. He notices that both generals look grim. Neither will meet his eyes. In the study, Burgdorf closes the door. He doesn't sit. He stands at attention and tells Rommel why they're there. The Führer knows about the conspiracy. Hofacker talked. Other conspirators confirmed it. Rommel is implicated. Not as an active plotter, but as someone who knew and didn't report it. Someone who agreed to help the traitors after they killed the Führer. Rommel listens without interrupting. His face shows nothing. Burgdorf continues. The Führer has decided to give Rommel a choice. He can return to Berlin to face trial before the People's Court. If he chooses that option, the trial will be public. The charges will be detailed. The evidence will be presented, and when he's found guilty, as he certainly will be, he'll be hanged. His family will be arrested. His wife and son will face the consequences of his treason. Or, Burgdorf says, Rommel can take poison. Here, today. His death will be announced as resulting from his injuries. He'll receive a state funeral with full military honors. The Führer will give the eulogy. Rommel's family will receive his full pension. His son will be allowed to continue his military career. His reputation will remain untarnished. Burgdorf pulls a small wooden box from his pocket. Inside are 2 glass capsules of cyanide. The Führer is giving Rommel 15 minutes to decide. Rommel stares at the capsules. He doesn't argue. He doesn't protest his innocence. He knows there's no point. Hitler has already decided. This isn't a negotiation. It's an execution with paperwork. He asks Burgdorf one question. Is there any way to save his family if he chooses to fight this in court? Burgdorf shakes his head. The Führer's decision is final. Trial means disgrace and death for everyone. Suicide means honor and protection. Rommel nods. He asks for a few minutes alone. Burgdorf and Meisel step outside. Rommel goes to find Lucy and Manfred. He takes them aside, tells them what's happening. Lucy starts to cry. Manfred, 15 years old, asks if there's any way to fight this. Rommel shakes his head. He tells them this is the only way to protect them. In 15 minutes, he'll get in the car with Burgdorf and Meisel. He won't come back, but they'll be safe. He hugs his wife. He hugs his son. He tells them he loves them. He tells Manfred to be strong, to take care of his mother, to remember that he did what he had to do. Then he puts on his Afrika Korps leather jacket, the one he wore in the desert, the one everyone recognizes from the photographs. He walks outside. Bergdorf and Maisel are waiting by the car. Rommel gets in the back seat. Bergdorf gets in beside him. Maisel gets in front with the driver. The car pulls away. Lucy and Manfred watch from the doorway. The driver heads toward Ulm. About 3 miles from Rommel's house, Bergdorf tells the driver to pull over. They're on a quiet stretch of road surrounded by trees. No witnesses. Bergdorf hands Rommel one of the cyanide capsules. Rommel takes it. He looks at it for a moment, this tiny glass ampule that will end everything. Then he bites down. The poison acts in seconds. Rommel convulses. His body spasms. He slumps against the seat. Bergdorf and Maisel watch, making sure he's dead. Then Bergdorf tells the driver to head to the reserve hospital in Ulm. They'll say Rommel died en route from a brain embolism, a complication from his July injuries. At the hospital, doctors examine the body. They know immediately what happened. Cyanide poisoning has obvious signs, but they also know who's in the car with the body. They write cerebral embolism on the death certificate. That evening, German radio announces that Field Marshal Erwin Rommel has died from injuries sustained in the July 17 attack. The Führer is deeply saddened. Rommel was one of Germany's greatest soldiers. He will be given a state funeral. On October 18, the funeral takes place in Ulm. Hitler doesn't attend. He sends Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt to give the eulogy. Thousands of people line the streets. The army provides full military honors. No one mentions conspiracy. No one mentions suicide. The official story is that Rommel died a hero, a victim of enemy action. Lucy and Manfred know the truth, but they can't speak it. Not while the war continues. Not while the Gestapo is still watching. They accept the state funeral, the pension, the condolences. They play their part in Hitler's fiction. But in private, Manfred asks his mother a question that will haunt him for the rest of his life. What did Hitler say when he found out about his father? What were the Führer's exact words when he learned that Rommel, his desert fox, his propaganda hero, had turned against him? Lucy doesn't know. No one knows. There's no transcript, no recording, no witness who will talk. All they know is what Hitler did, and what he did reveals everything about what he must have felt. Hitler was betrayed by the man he'd created. The field marshal he'd promoted, the general he'd trusted, the hero he'd used in countless propaganda campaigns. And Hitler's response wasn't justice. It wasn't even honest revenge. It was erasure. He made Rommel disappear in a way that protected Hitler's own image, that prevented the German people from learning that their beloved desert fox had lost faith in the Führer. Because that's what terrified Hitler most. Not that Rommel had conspired against him, but that Rommel, the practical soldier, the brilliant tactician, the man who'd seen the war from North Africa to Normandy, had concluded that Germany was going to lose, that continuing the fight was pointless, that Hitler's leadership was leading Germany to destruction. That truth was more dangerous than any bomb. And so Hitler did what he always did when confronted with a truth he couldn't accept. He buried it. He forced Rommel to take poison on a quiet road outside Ulm. He staged a state funeral. He had his subordinates lie on the death certificate. He turned Rommel's murder into a hero's death from wounds. And he went back to his maps, his plans, his delusions of victory as if nothing had happened. As if one of his best generals hadn't just chosen death over serving him any longer. As if the fact that Rommel had lost faith in him didn't mean anything. 3 months later, in January 1945, Hitler is in his bunker in Berlin as the Red Army closes in. Germany is collapsing. The Eastern Front has disintegrated. The Western Allies are across the Rhine. The war is lost, exactly as Rommel predicted. But Hitler still won't accept it. He issues orders to armies that no longer exist. He plans offensives with divisions that have been destroyed. He rages at his generals for their defeatism, their lack of will, their failure to believe in final victory. And sometimes, according to those who are with him in those final days, he mentions Rommel, not by name, just references to traitors, to those who lost faith, to those who would have surrendered rather than fight to the end. The bitterness is still there, the sense of betrayal, because Hitler never understood what Rommel understood, that wars aren't won by will alone, that sometimes the professional soldier's duty is to recognize when the fight is lost, when continuing means only more death, more destruction, more suffering for no purpose. Rommel saw that in 1944. He tried to tell Hitler, and when Hitler wouldn't listen, when it became clear that the Führer would rather destroy Germany than admit defeat, Rommel made his choice. He aligned himself, carefully and conditionally, with those who wanted to end the madness. And Hitler's response, when he discovered it, was to offer Rommel poison on a quiet road in Bavaria, to turn his murder into a state funeral, to bury the truth along with the body. That's what Hitler said when he discovered Rommel was contacting his enemies, not with words, but with actions. Not with a trial that might reveal uncomfortable truths, but with cyanide and a cover story. Not with honest rage, but with the cold calculation of a dictator who knew that Rommel's doubts, if made public, would shatter the myth Hitler had spent years constructing. Rommel's death wasn't the end of the story. It was a symbol of everything that was wrong with Hitler's Germany. A regime where the truth was so dangerous that it had to be poisoned on a quiet road. Where a field marshal's military judgment was treated as treason. Where loyalty meant believing the Führer's delusions even as the country burned. Manfred Rommel survived the war. He became mayor of Stuttgart, served for over 20 years, became known for his integrity and his commitment to democracy. He spent decades trying to understand his father's final months, trying to piece together exactly what Erwin Rommel knew, what he agreed to, what he hoped to accomplish. He concluded that his father wasn't a resistance hero. He hadn't actively plotted against Hitler, but he'd lost faith. He'd recognized that Germany was losing the war, and when men who wanted to end the war approached him, he'd listened. He'd agreed to help, not to kill Hitler, but to negotiate peace after someone else removed him, and for that, Hitler had him killed. Not in anger, not in a rage, but coldly, deliberately, with poison and a cover story. That was Hitler's answer to Rommel's betrayal. Not justice, but erasure. Not punishment, but silence. The two generals who delivered Hitler's ultimatum, Bergdorf and Mazel, both died in the final days of the war. Bergdorf committed suicide in Hitler's bunker on May 2, 1945, the day after Hitler's own suicide. Mazel was killed in the fighting in Berlin. Neither ever spoke publicly about what happened on that road outside Ulm. The truth emerged slowly, in fragments, in the years after the war. From Lucy Rommel's testimony, from Manfred's memories, from documents captured by the Allies, from the interrogations of surviving conspirators. Piece by piece, the story came together. And what it revealed was a moment that encapsulated everything about Hitler's regime. A moment when military reality collided with totalitarian delusion. When a field marshal's professional judgment was treated as treason. When the truth was so dangerous that it had to be buried along with the man who recognized it. Hitler's words, when he learned about Rommel, are lost to history. But his actions spoke clearly enough. He chose poison over trial. Cover story over truth. Silence over justice. And in doing so, he revealed exactly what kind of leader he was. The kind who would rather kill his own generals than admit they might be right. The kind who would rather destroy Germany than accept defeat. The kind who, in the end, took millions with him into the abyss rather than face the reality that men like Rommel had recognized months or years earlier. That's what Hitler said when he discovered Rommel was contacting his enemies. He said it with cyanide. He said it with a state funeral. He said it with a lie that lasted until Germany lay in ruins and Hitler himself was dead in his bunker. And in saying it that way, he proved that Rommel had been right all along.